We're back on the record. In 14 CR 1432, Mr. Jones does appear in custody, represented by Ms. Smith, and Mr. Colvin, Mr. Rubenstein, and Mr. Wade are both here for the people. We're outside the presence of our jury. Anything before I invite our jury back in? Mr. Rubenstein?
No, sir.
Mr. Colvin?
No, sir.
All right, thanks. I'll go ahead and call for him. Please rise for our jury. All right, thank you. Please be seated. For the record, our jury has joined us back in the courtroom. Welcome back, everybody. We're ready for the next defense witness, Ms. Smith.
Yes, the defense calls Christy Steves.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. If you could approach, I need to give you an oath before you testify, and then if you'll be careful, this black cord we have stretched out across your walkway. Thanks. You raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. All right, thanks. If you have a seat in the green chair by the microphone, please. Thank you. You can proceed whenever you're ready, Ms. Smith.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you say what your name is?
My name is Christy Steves.
And how do you spell Christy and Steves?
Kristi is Christy and Steves for Steves.
And do you live here in Grand Junction?
Yes, ma'am.
And how long have you lived here?
Pretty much my whole life.
And what do you currently do for a living?
I work for an ophthalmologist.
And what do you do there?
I'm a technician.
Did you previously go through a pretty bad time in your life?
Yes, ma'am.
And during that time, did you use drugs?
Yes.
Were you a prostitute?
Yes.
Are you doing much better now?
Yes.
Are you sober?
Yes, ma'am.
And obviously you're working. Do you also have kids?
I have a son, yes.
Do you know Wayne D'Amico?
I do.
How do you know Mr. D'Amico?
I used to do drugs with him and get money from him for sexual acts.
How did you first meet him? Do you remember?
It was through a mutual friend
Okay.
who had put an ad in Craigslist or something like that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Was that mutual friend Paige Bergfeld?
No.
Do you know approximately when you met Mr. D'Amico?
I was about 19 or 20.
So would that be maybe 2010-ish?
Yeah, sounds right.
So, when did you stop seeing him?
A couple years after that.
And so your relationship with Mr. D'Amico was a couple years, give or take?
Yeah.
When did you last have contact with him?
It's been several years. I'm sorry, I don't recall exact dates or even exact years.
Okay. How many times over the course of that 2-year period do you think that you saw him?
Maybe about 12 times.
Where would you meet up with him?
At his place of work, at a hotel, various locations, I don't know.
And what was, you met up at his car dealership, is that what you said?
Yes, we did.
Did it seem to you that the relationship, did it appear to you that he viewed the relationship as more than just professional?
I did have that thought a few times, yeah.
Okay. Was it your perception that he was showing interest in you above and beyond just being a prostitute?
Yeah.
And why? Why was that your impression?
He just had really obsessive behaviors, calling me a lot and leaving very long voicemails, showing up to places where I was at unannounced.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but can you say how this made you feel when he was acting this way towards you?
I felt creeped out.
Did you and Mr. D'Amico do drugs together?
Yes, ma'am.
And did Mr. D'Amico watch pornography in your presence?
Yes, ma'am.
And based on your observations, why do you think Mr. D'Amico watched pornography and did drugs in your presence?
He seemed to be addicted to sex and drugs.
Okay. When you met, typically when you were working as a prostitute, did you bring other people with you for security?
When I was going to meet Wayne, yes.
Okay. Oh, not with your other clients or depended?
No, I would bring somebody when it came to Wayne, yeah.
Okay. And that was for security?
Yes, that was because, like I was saying, he creeped me out.
What was your impression about Mr. D'Amico's reaction to when you would bring another person with you?
He didn't like it.
Did he indicate to you that he wanted you to come alone?
A few times, yes.
Did he sometimes get upset with you if you were late to your appointments with him?
Yes.
How did Mr. D'Amico react when he found out you were around other men?
He was angry.
And did he understand that, right, it's very clear that you were, at the time, a prostitute, right?
Correct.
And that he wasn't your only client?
In this town at that point, yes, he was.
Oh, he was your only client?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But he would am I clear that he would get upset if he knew you were with other men, even though your relationship with him was supposed to be professional?
Yes, he would.
Okay. Now, you mentioned these messages he left. Did he leave those messages for you when, during this 2-year period of time when he was a client of yours? You have to say
Yes.
yes. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
And then, Did they stop once you stopped seeing him?
Gradually, yeah.
So they continued for a little bit after you stopped seeing him?
As far as I remember, yeah.
Okay. And how, I'm sorry, Ms. Steves, I think you said that these were long messages that he would leave them frequently, is that correct?
He would leave them on my phone when I wouldn't show up or wouldn't answer his calls.
Oh, okay. And how else would you describe your feelings and when you would receive one of these messages?
It would make me feel uneasy,
Okay, disturbing?
disturbed, yeah.
So did I understand you correctly that sometimes you would not show up for appointments you had with him?
That's correct.
Okay. And why was that?
Either I just wouldn't want to, I wouldn't have somebody with me, or various reasons.
And how did you, and there obviously came a time too where you tried to end the relationship, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Was that because, were you just trying to sort of get out of that business, or you were just sort of done seeing him?
I was just trying to get my life together and do other things.
Okay, sure. And then how did he react to that decision of yours?
I'm not sure.
But it was clear he didn't like it when you didn't show up, right?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the continuing leading nature of the questions.
The objection is sustained to the last question.
Okay.
The objection needs to be contemporaneous. So, thank you.
Did you make a report to law enforcement in 2011 about the Paige Bergfeld case?
Yes, I did.
Did that report involve Wayne D'Amico?
Yes, it did.
Where were you living when you made that report?
I was living at the Women's Recovery Center.
And what is that?
It's it's an in-house rehab.
Okay, so like a residential rehabilitation program?
Yes, ma'am.
And so then when you made that call, were you currently using drugs?
No, I was in the program. I was sober.
Okay. When you made that report, who was with you?
I believe I had my counselor with me.
And was that an easy call to make?
No, ma'am.
Why not?
Well, I didn't want, obviously, to be involved in any way, and it was just something I had to do to heal myself.
Were you also a little bit afraid of Mr. D'Amico at that
Your
time?
Honor, again, leading.
Objection sustained.
Were there any other reasons?
I didn't want to be on anybody's bad side, and I didn't want to be involved in this.
Okay. But despite not wanting to be involved, you made the call anyway?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you in trouble with the law when you were in that program?
I don't recall.
Okay. Well, were you doing it okay, so,
I wasn't doing it to benefit myself in any way.
okay. All right. I'm sorry, Ms. Steves. I am sorry about this. I'm sort of losing track here. Did you say that you weren't afraid of Mr. D'Amico when you made the call?
I was afraid of his reaction, yeah.
You were?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you request that the call remain anonymous?
Yes, I did.
Okay, how many, oh, I don't, when did you make that call? Do you remember? Does 2011 sound right?
It sounds right, yeah.
And back in 2011, was that, how much contact with law enforcement did you have about this case back in 2011?
About this case, one,
Okay, you remember one phone call?
that's correct, yeah.
Do you remember, now, obviously, you're in the Women's Recovery Program, your counselor's right there, and you're making this call to law enforcement. Did you feel, was it uncomfortable for you to talk about how you knew Mr. D'Amico?
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, yeah.
Okay, and is it fair to say it's uncomfortable now, too?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Was there more information that you would have liked to have shared with law enforcement, maybe in person, without your counselor sitting right there? Any sort of follow-up that you would have liked to have been able to do?
I believe I said everything I needed to say during the phone call.
Okay. Do you remember talking to the investigator about maybe doing a pretext call with Mr. D'Amico? Does that ring a bell?
That does sound familiar, yes.
And what was your understanding at the time, if any, of what that would look like?
That I was to somehow bring it up into the conversation and record what he had to say.
Oh, okay. And law enforcement would help you with that?
That's correct, that was my understanding.
Okay, did that ever happen?
No, ma'am.
And did any investigator ever follow up with you about doing that?
I'm not sure, ma'am. Once I'm in the facility, it would be really hard for anybody to reach me because of HIPAA.
Oh, I see. So they might have contacted the facility and not gotten through to you?
Right.
Okay, so a 90-day program, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So when you got out, did any law enforcement follow up with you on that?
No, ma'am.
When you were with Mr. D'Amico, did he talk about Ms. Bergfeld?
There was a time, yes.
And did he used to, before we get to this specific time, when he would talk about Ms. Bergfeld, how would he talk about her?
He talked about her, saying that he really cared about her, and basically good things to say about her.
Okay, he spoke highly of her.
Yeah.
Did you know Ms. Bergfeld at all?
Not at all.
Did Mr. D'Amico tell you that Ms. Bergfeld was like his best friend?
He did say something along those lines, yeah.
Did it appear to you in the way that Mr. D'Amico talked about Ms. Bergfeld that he was obsessed with her?
Judge again, leading.
The objection sustained.
Okay. How, based on your conversations with Mr. D'Amico about Ms. Bergfeld, what was your impression of how he related to her and how he related to her?
Judge lack of personal knowledge and pure speculation at this point, I think.
Is it based on her observations, or?
Yes, I believe that's what I said, based on her observations of when he's talking to her about Ms. Bergfeld.
Okay, the objection's overruled.
He would say that he hasn't felt
Your Honor, I'm
like
going to
how
object this is hearsay at this point.
Ms. Smith, do you want to respond to the hearsay objection?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Your Honor. I believe that the foundation has been met for this hearsay to be admitted under 1610-201. Mr. D'Amico is still under subpoena, and he did make contrary statements under oath just now.
Mr. Waite?
I guess I don't know what statement she's going to impeach with, but it sounds to me like these aren't the same statements that he was talking about during his testimony.
Okay, the objection's overruled.
So Ms. Steves, what were you about to say?
He told me that he hadn't felt what he felt for Paige about anybody until he met me, and so that made me feel like he was obsessed with her as well.
I see. Okay, so to your mind, not asking you to read anybody else's mind, but to your mind, based on what Mr. D'Amico talked to you and how he talked to you, he had a connection, there was a connection between you and Ms. Bergfeld.
In my mind, in my experience with Wayne, yeah, that's what I got from that.
I see, okay. Now, was there, I think you maybe briefly hit on this earlier, but I was wondering if you could explain about an incident at the Infinity nightclub that you had with Mr. D'Amico.
I was out with some friends. We had just gotten done with a concert, and we went to the Infinity nightclub with the performers from the concert. I was not 21 yet, so I wasn't able to get into the bar. So I waited out in the limo for them to get done and come back out. And Wayne was outside of the bar. He noticed me and he started pacing back and forth, calling my name, telling me to get out of the limo right now.
Okay. Was this a time that you had scheduled to meet Mr. D'Amico?
No,
Okay, so the both of you just happened to be at this nightclub?
that's correct.
Okay. And when you saw Mr. D'Amico behaving in this way, how did you react?
I stayed in the limo
And why did you do that?
because I was scared, I guess.
And then when you wouldn't get out of the limo, what did Mr. D'Amico start doing?
Well, like I was saying, he was just pacing back and forth and just looking at me.
Did he start calling your phone?
I believe so. I don't recall.
And was there a time after this Infinity incident when you and he were talking about the incident?
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, did he make any threats against you?
At that point, he told me that he wished he could have gone on the limo and dragged me out by my hair.
Was there another incident where Mr. D'Amico found you at a hotel?
That was the same night later on.
Oh, okay. So again, did you have an appointment to meet up with Mr. D'Amico at that hotel?
No, ma'am.
How was he able to find you?
I'm not exactly 100% sure, but once he found out what hotel I was in, he came and acted like he was a concerned parent.
So
that
you
he was looking for me, and so that got the hotel and staff involved, and I ended up leaving with him.
so you didn't tell him which hotel you were at?
No.
Okay. Why did you leave with him?
Basically just so the harassment would stop. He was calling over and over, making a big scene of it, and he had promised that he was going to take me home. So I left with him.
Did you ever tell Mr. D'Amico where you lived?
No.
Was there a time when he figured out where you lived?
Yes.
How, so, do you know how he figured out where you lived?
I don't.
Did Mr. D'Amico make threats that involved your son?
Yes, he did.
And what was that?
He said that he would leave him motherless.
And did you take this seriously?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So how did it make you feel when he said those things about your son? Or about, I guess, about you involving your son?
It made me angry.
Okay, so now back to the report that you made to law enforcement when you were in the Women's Recovery Center. Was that report that you made about something that Mr. D'Amico said?
Yes.
Okay. What did Mr. D'Amico say to you that you thought was important enough to then report?
He asked me if I knew about the Paige case after he was done telling me, complimenting her and saying that I reminded him of her in some way. He asked me if I knew about it, and I said yes, and he said he did that.
Okay. And so based on the form of the conversation, when he said I did that, what was your understanding about what he was referring to?
That he killed Paige.
And did he give you any description? I mean, did he explain how he had done this?
What he told me is that he knew how to get rid of a body so that nobody could find it. He mentioned a wood chipper and then proceeded to say, I did that about Paige.
And what was the context of this conversation?
It was about the night at the bar when he had seen me and I hadn't gotten out of the limo and he had to hunt me down. We were recalling that night, and he was trying to get, in my opinion, he was trying to get some kind of control or fear built into me that I would do what he was saying.
Okay. So that you would do what he told you to do?
What he wanted me to do at any point, like get off the limo or go see him. I just feel like he wanted to have some kind of control of me.
Okay. And that was your impression of why he was telling you about what he had done to Ms. Bergfeld?
That's my impression now. My impression then was that he told me because he actually did it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Now, let me ask you this. When he was talking to you about this, was he angry?
I don't know about angry. There's like kind of some dark in his eyes, and he was calm, eerie calm.
Oh, okay. And did it scare you?
Yes.
Did you ask a lot of follow-up questions?
Not at all. No, I tried to sweep it off like I didn't hear it, like I didn't register with me so that he wouldn't think of me as a threat or somebody who knows his secret.
I see, okay. Now, did you happen to be by yourself at this meeting?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And why did you go to that one by yourself?
I don't remember the details. Sometimes I wouldn't obviously care about my best interest or my safety, and I would just go do things on
Okay.
impulse, yeah.
And sometimes did he give you drugs?
Yes.
Okay, and was that a night he gave you drugs?
Yes, we were doing drugs at his place of work where we were located during this interaction, and then he gave me some.
Okay. Now, so given the fact that you were doing drugs with him that night, how would you say your mindset is or your perception was?
Obviously, the drugs altered my mindset some, but I knew what was going on and I knew what he said.
Okay, and did it stick in your memory?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. When Mr. D'Amico was making this comment to you, did it appear to be a joke to you?
No.
Did he indicate that he was just making movie quotes?
No.
Did, so again, I think you had talked about how he sometimes compared, well, never mind, I think you already answered that. So, I think I just have one more question for you. Did you have, when Mr. D'Amico told you this, made these statements to you, what was your physical reaction?
I got goosebumps over my whole body, and I just kind of had the fight or flight instinct and got out of there shortly after.
Okay, so it sounds like you were pretty terrified. Mm-hmm. Is that a yes?
Yes, that's
Okay.
a yes. Sorry.
All right. I have nothing else. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Steves.
Mr. Waite, cross-examination.
Your Honor, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Ms. Steves.
Good morning.
So, if I understand right, the night that he made these statements to you, you had gone, well, that had been after the Infinity nightclub situation?
That's correct.
You had, despite all of the stuff that happened at the Infinity nightclub, you had gone over to his place of employment,
Yes.
correct? After hours,
Yes.
going to have sex, and he was going to pay you for sex?
It was more about cocaine at that instant, but yeah.
Okay, so more about drugs. The two of you were doing drugs that night.
Yes.
Did a lot of drugs that night.
I don't recall how much.
Okay.
Sorry.
And despite this being after the Infinity nightclub thing, you had indicated that you went over there by yourself. You had had other incidents where you had taken someone with you.
Yes.
Let me clarify that. The other incidents where you took somebody with you, what was that other person doing while you were having sex and doing drugs with Mr. D'Amico?
They would be doing the same thing.
Okay. So you would go over with someone else, woman or man,
Women.
and they would do drugs as well at the same time you were doing drugs?
More or less, yeah.
Okay, and then they were there while you were having sex with Mr. D'Amico?
They were there during whatever I was doing, yeah.
Okay. You had indicated that you had, I believe you said you had multiple trips over to have sex and do drugs with Mr. D'Amico. You said, I think, at least 12 times? Is that correct?
I believe so.
Each
Roughly.
time you were getting paid to have sex with him?
For different things, different situations.
Okay. And during that time, not only were you doing drugs with him, but you were doing other drugs as well, is that right? He wasn't the only one where you were getting drugs.
No, I was an addict at the time.
Okay. At the time he made this statement, it sounds to me like you had all of these 12 occasions to go over to his place, both before and after the time that you're talking about that scared you a little bit.
That's correct.
Okay. So even though you left, and I think your words with Ms. Smith were that you got goosebumps and were terrified, nonetheless, you went back over and spent time again with Mr. D'Amico.
Her word was terrified, mine was scared. And yes, that is correct.
Okay. So you weren't scared enough to not go over and have sex with him and do drugs with him again?
I wasn't in my right mind enough to not do that.
Okay. Now, you talked about this Infinity nightclub incident, and it sounds like you were in the limo with the boys in the band, so to speak?
Yes,
You couldn't get into the nightclub because you were too young,
that's correct.
but you were in the limo, I assume, doing drugs and drinking in the limo with the boys
I
in the
was
band?
waiting for them to be done
Okay.
with
And-
the other people that were underage.
Okay. And he knew you were underage because he knew how old you were, right?
He, as in Wayne?
As in Wayne?
Yes.
Sorry. And so Wayne was trying to get you out of the limo and out of that situation, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And he even went so far as to follow you or somehow find out that you went to a hotel again with the boys in the band to party and so forth, correct?
He found out where I was at, yeah.
Okay. And he went there and he pretended to be your father.
That's correct.
That was, I assume, just to get into the hotel to find you.
I assume.
Okay. And he found you and you left there with him,
That's
despite the
correct.
fact that there were a number of people around, and you certainly could have told anybody, hey, this isn't my dad.
That's correct.
Nonetheless, you left with him.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you said he called you a lot and he would leave some long voicemails and you kind of felt creeped out. Was that during the course of this kind of relationship you were having with Mr. D'Amico?
Yes.
Okay. Despite those calls, you would still go over and meet with Mr. D'Amico and have sex and do drugs. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you say he was your only client at the time?
Yes.
Did you have other clients before him or after him?
No.
Okay, so he was your only client that you ever had to have sex and do drugs and the like?
In the terms of that type of relationship, yes.
Okay. You said you reported this to the police in 2011. Sounds like it happened quite some time before that. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement, yeah.
How many years from the time that you and Mr. D'Amico had this relationship of sorts did you finally tell law enforcement?
Like I was saying, I don't recall. It was somewhere maybe in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle of,
The time we spent together.
okay. Because there were times, even after this women's recovery program that you went through, that you called on Mr. D'Amico to help you out, right?
That's correct.
There were times, even as late as 2014, when you were calling Mr. D'Amico to come and help bail you out of jail. Is that correct?
I did call and have him bail me out of jail. That's correct.
Okay. With respect to the pretext call, it sounds like, you said it sounded familiar, maybe somebody has suggested that might be something that they do with
Yeah.
you? And that never got followed up, but you were in women's recovery for some time after that, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and you said it was hard to reach you during that time.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to.
And when you left women's recovery, you didn't reach out to law enforcement to try and give them any more information, is that right?
That's correct.
You didn't reach out to them to help them in their investigation of Mr. D'Amico at that point either?
I did at one point, and that was the only point I did.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you specifically about that conversation that you said you had with Mr. D'Amico. As I understand it, you said that he was speaking about Paige, correct?
Correct.
Saying very good things about Paige, complimenting her, saying good things about the way she was,
That's correct.
that he cared about her,
That's kind of what I was gathering, yeah.
that like he was, she was perhaps like his best friend at least.
He made it sound like she was very special to him.
Okay. And then he said to you something about that he hadn't felt the way he felt about you since Paige.
That's correct.
Okay. And that made you, it sounds to me like he was trying to make you feel good, that he was trying to make you feel like you were in the same category with Paige. Is that a fair statement?
He was trying to make it sound like I was in the same category. I didn't get the feel of it was a good thing.
Well, out of that conversation about him talking about all the good things about Paige, likening you to Paige, that somehow he makes a statement about some sort of a wood chipper?
That's correct.
Out of that same conversation?
Yes.
Okay. So out of that same nice conversation in which he's telling you all these good things, he says that he killed Paige and that he did it with a wood chipper?
That's correct.
Okay. And while he was making those statements, you said that, certainly at the time you felt differently, but as you've thought about it, it wasn't a comment about him actually doing it.
It was a comment about him actually doing it. That's why I went forward and told detectives about it. And at that time, I did believe him.
Okay. Since then, you've figured out that you actually don't believe that he would have killed Paige.
Objection, credibility vouching.
The objection's overruled.
Go ahead.
Since then, no, I don't think he killed Paige.
Thank you, Ms. Steves.
Ms. Smith, redirect.
Ms. Steves, I just have a couple more questions for you. When you've testified in this matter before, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And at that hearing before, you didn't testify that you don't think Mr. D'Amico killed Ms. Bergfeld, did you?
I did not testify my opinion of what I think.
Okay. And so why is it your opinion then now? I mean, why is your opinion changed?
I was just answering the questions.
Okay. Now, can you explain a little bit about how this conversation with Mr. D'Amico that included how much he likes Ms. Bergfeld and therefore how much he likes you turned into a confession of murder?
He was likening me to her to prepare me for the statement of what he did to her.
Okay.
So he was saying, yeah, it was good things about her, but in the manner that he was saying it, in my opinion, he was trying to scare me and to say that, look, you're on the same level as this person, and this is what I did to this person.
Okay. I like this person a great deal. I killed this person.
Yeah.
I like you a great deal. I could kill you.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you, and what was his tone of voice or demeanor during this conversation?
He was just matter of fact. I don't know, cold. I don't know.
Now, it sounds like, just to be very clear, Mr. D'Amico gave you drugs and he gave you money, right?
That's correct.
And this was in a period of time where I think you said you were an addict?
That's correct, yes.
Did you make good decisions for yourself when you were in this period of your life?
No, not at all.
Okay. Did you put your safety before the drugs and money?
No, I did not.
Okay. Was it actually the reverse?
It was actually the reverse.
Now, you mentioned that you would often have another woman come with you when you met with Mr. D'Amico.
That's right.
And I'm not asking for that person's name, but did you provide that name or some of those names to law enforcement?
I don't recall.
Okay. So this Infinity incident where Mr. D'Amico's outside the limo and then comes and finds you at the hotel, was it your impression that Mr. D'Amico was doing these things to be fatherly and take care of you and keep you safe?
It was my impression that he wanted complete control of what I was doing
Okay.
for his own benefit, not for mine.
Okay. And would it be your impression that he was giving you drugs and paying you money for sex to take care of you and look out for your safety?
No.
Okay. I have nothing else, thank you.
Mr. Wade, other questions?
Nothing based on that, Judge.
Is she under subpoena, and if so, is she released? Ms. Smith?
Okay, she's under subpoena and we would like to keep her under subpoena for now.
Okay, thank you. You're free to go for now, but you're still under subpoena. So if you'll still stay in touch with the lawyers, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Your next witness, Ms. Smith?
The defense would like to call Lisa Whelan.
Okay. Feel free to stretch if anybody wishes. Thank you. Morning. If you could approach, I need to give you an oath before you testify. We have a black cord stretched out across your walkway, too. Thank you. You'd raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right, thanks. If you have a seat in the green chair, please. Thank you. And then you can proceed whenever you're ready, Ms. Smith.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning. Can you please state your name?
Lisa Whelan,
How do you spell Whelan?
Whalin.
Do you know Wayne D'Amico?
Yes.
How do you know him?
I was in a relationship with him previously,
Okay, when did you first meet him?
1999,
And then how long were you all together for?
until 2011.
Did you live together at one point?
We did
How long did you live together for?
about 5 years.
Did Mr. D'Amico ever perpetrate domestic violence against you?
Yes,
Was it so bad that you were afraid to leave him?
yes.
After, when you ended the relationship when the relationship ended in 2011, did you still see him after that?
Yes.
And how come?
Mostly because I was fearful of him, tried to keep him calm, tried to keep him from becoming angry.
Okay, so you would see him if he wanted to see you?
Correct.
Okay. When the relationship, let's see. After the relationship ended and he was contacting you, did you become aware that he was sort of keeping tabs on you at any point?
Yes.
And what made you think that was going on?
Things would happen. He would, a recent example was my son was home from college. We had gone out to dinner. His car was in the parking lot, and Wayne called my son out in front of my house.
Oh, okay. So Wayne Mr. D'Amico then somehow knew your son was home, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what you think then is he must have driven by your house to see your son's car? Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, he would have.
And
Could you
with,
do me a favor and pull the microphone a little closer to you and maybe point it a little bit down? Thank you so much. Ms. Smith?
and when was that? Was that this year?
Yes, it was in February of this year.
How does this continued, so do you want this continued contact with Mr. D'Amico?
No.
How does this continued contact make you feel?
Well, just to be clear, I haven't had contact with him. I haven't spoken with him in quite a long time.
Oh, okay.
But I would say it's a little unnerving to know that he continues to keep tabs on me, I guess.
Okay. Is it do you feel that he's trying to control you?
Right now, currently,
Yeah.
no.
Okay. What about after the relationship ended?
Yes.
Now, in terms of the domestic violence, did some of that, was some of that him threatening you?
Yes.
Did he make a specific threat to burn your house down?
I don't know if that was related to any incidents of violence, but yes, he made those types of threats.
Okay, how many times?
I don't know.
More-
More than once.
more than once,
More than
okay.
twice.
And was this during the relationship or after the relationship or both?
Both.
Has he done any, property damage to your cars?
Yes.
And what did he do to your vehicles?
He flattened the tire on my car
And was that during the relationship or after?
during.
During, okay. I know this may be a silly question, Ms. Whelan, but when your tire was flat, did that make it hard to leave, hard to get where you needed to go?
Yes, I couldn't leave the house.
Okay. And were there other times during the relationship when you lived together that you would lock him out of the house?
Oftentimes, if he would not come home for days and days at a time, and I would, yes, lock the house.
And then what would he do when he did return?
I mean, he could get in through the garage door. If I locked the entrance to the house from the garage, on one occasion, he broke the door.
Okay. And were there, okay, I want to talk to you about some specific incidents. Was there an incident in 2001 where you got some help from law enforcement?
Yes.
And what was that incident?
An argument where he kind of tossed me around, I guess I would say.
And were you hesitant to report that?
Yes.
And why was that?
I was very scared.
Did him tossing you around the house cause you any injuries?
Yes, it did. Some mild scratches, I think, and scrapes.
And during this incident, did Mr. D'Amico use any tools, or did he,
He,
weapons, I guess? What would you call it?
he
Tell me what he
used
did.
a hammer and was pounding it on his own table near where I was sitting.
Okay, were you in the other room when that happened?
No.
You were right there?
Yes.
Was that actually a claw hammer?
Yes.
And how did you react to that?
I was scared.
Was there a point during that incident where Mr. D'Amico threw you down on the couch?
Yes.
Okay, what happened there?
I believe he pulled some of my jewelry off.
Did he choke you?
Yes.
Was this the first time that Mr. D'Amico had physically harmed you?
No.
Was there another incident where you sustained some broken bones?
There was an incident that I didn't report Yes, where I had 2 cracked ribs.
And I'm sorry to keep belaboring this point, but did you not report that for the same reasons, that you were scared?
Yes.
Was there another domestic violence incident that you reported to the police on Christmas Eve of 2008?
Yes.
What happened in that incident?
He hadn't come home on Christmas Eve. I had gone to bed. He came home intoxicated. I had locked the house. He broke in.
And did he cause some property damage there?
He did. He pushed me up against a wall and hit the wall right by my head and left a hole in the wall.
In your time knowing Mr. D'Amico, did he make comments to you about putting people through wood chippers?
Yes.
And what was if you can explain sort of the context or his demeanor when he would make these comments?
He would typically, was like a joke to him.
Did you take it as a joke?
I didn't.
Okay. What effect did these sorts of comments have on you?
It was just probably more of his intimidation. Felt intimidating at times.
Intimidating, okay. And did you ever take them as threatening to you?
Yes.
Is it difficult for you to be here today talking about your relationship with Mr. D'Amico?
Yes.
And is it difficult I imagine it's difficult to have all this drug back up your
Yes.
past. Are you still afraid of Mr. D'Amico?
Anytime I see his vehicle or anything, my heart pounds. So yes, I guess so.
Okay. During your time with Mr. D'Amico, during your relationship with him, did he use prostitutes?
I believe he did. He was not typically truthful about many things.
How did you figure out, or why do you think he did?
Right before we moved in together, I can't remember exactly how I ended up with his phone, looking through contacts and called a couple. Unusual charges on a credit card, that kind of thing, for massage service of some sort.
Okay. Now, do you remember when Ms. Bergfeld went missing? I mean, do you remember that period of time, like hearing about her disappearance?
Yes.
Okay. At that period of time, were you living with Mr. D'Amico?
Yes.
And during this period of time, did you keep a journal to track whether Mr. D'Amico had come home or not?
At different points in time I did. Whether I did at that exact point in time, I don't know.
Okay. And can you just explain real briefly what this was for, why you did that?
I think I kept track of when he was home and when he was not, so that I just didn't feel crazy.
Oh, okay. And, so you're not sure now if you were keeping this log or this journal around the time Ms. Bergfeld went missing, right?
I don't know for sure.
Did you speak with law enforcement, specifically an investigator, McClellan, about this case back in 2012?
Yes, they contacted me.
Okay. And did you tell Investigator McClellan at that time that I'm sorry, I guess I just want to be clear. Did you actually indicate to Investigator McClellan at that time that you did have the log for the summer that Ms. Bergfeld went missing?
It was a journal,
A journal, I'm sorry, that you did have that journal.
correct.
And did you tell Investigator McClellan that for the last week of June and first week of July, there was no documentation in the journal that Mr. D'Amico was home?
There was nothing either way in my
Okay.
journal during that time.
During that summer of 2007, did you keep track of and pay the bills for the household?
Yes,
And did you go back and look through the bills and bank statements for that time period when Ms. Bergfeld disappeared?
yes,
Did that did that include like phone bills and bank statements?
yes.
Was most of it missing for that time frame?
Some of those items were missing during that time frame. Yes.
And what was your response to that? How did you feel about that?
I found it unusual because they keep detailed record
Yeah.
keeper.
Okay. And those would be your records to keep because that was your part of the household
Correct.
duties? Okay.
I filed all of it.
And were you prone to losing records or misplacing records?
No.
Did you said just now that you sensed that, you felt like that was unusual. Did you also tell Investigator McClellan that it freaked you out?
I don't recall my exact words, but that's potentially, yeah, I could have said that.
Okay, because that is how you recall feeling?
Yes.
Given that you lived with Mr. D'Amico when Ms. Bergfeld went missing, can you tell the jury what Mr. D'Amico was doing on the evening and the night of June 28th of 2007?
I have no idea.
What about the night of July 1st, 2007?
I don't know.
I have nothing else, thank you.
Mr. Rubenstein, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Ms. Whelan. It's difficult to be here, is that right?
I'm here.
Not a pleasant topic?
No.
Okay, so you were with Mr. D'Amico from 99 to 2011.
Yes.
About what years were you living together?
From the fall of 2006 until the spring of 2011.
Okay, and at some point during that